in a summary. We have just one little miracle or sign that happens that we'll talk about in that second catch. As we're wrapping up everything, we'll give you plenty of time to comment on all this stuff that we've been going through, and to talk about exactly what this class was about. How did we see all of these things different? What did we learn from all of this activity that we've been doing about John that we didn't know before? And that's really why, as Christians, we do this, so that we become better and more knowledgeable. And hopefully, and I pray this every day, that we did that in this class, that we took a look at John in maybe a different light than we normally did. We emphasized some scriptures that sometimes we just pass right over. And today is something that you're going to be asked again and again if you haven't already. I myself have been asked many times by someone who is a weak believer, non-believer. What do they say? How about this Lazarus, this guy that Jesus raised from the dead? Tell me why it is that he's the only one that spoke of it. If raising someone from the dead is so important, why wasn't it in all the other Gospels as well? You'd think that'd be something so important that all of them would talk about it. What are you going to say to that? What are you going to tell them about that? What are we going to learn about that today? Well, maybe we will learn something that will enable us to answer that question. Why did John talk about this and the others not? I mean, there's not even a mention of this in the other Gospels. And not only are we going to see here today that John talks about it, but he talks about it in intimate details. He's giving us stuff behind the scenes, who said this, what the people they were doing. He's got Martha serving people, Mary over here doing this. He gives us a lot of details and a lot of the accounts of what people said. And this is, again, raising someone from the dead is something that will get your attention, won't it? Okay, so we have this account that starts off in the 11th chapter of John. So that's where we're going to start today. We're going to start reading from the beginning of chapter 11, and we're going to go all the way through it until we get to him raising and why. In the beginning, chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha." Dear, can I get my glasses? Forgot my glasses. "And it was the Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. The sisters therefore sent to him, saying, 'Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick.' But when Jesus heard it, he says, 'This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified by it.' Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When therefore he heard that he was sick, he stayed then 2 days longer in the place where he was. And then after this, he said to the disciples, 'Let us go to Judea again.' The disciples said to him, 'Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again?' And Jesus answered, 'Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him.' This he said, and after that he said to them, 'Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go that I may awaken him out of that sleep.' The disciples therefore said to him, 'Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover.' Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought he was speaking of literal sleep. Then Jesus therefore said to them plainly, 'Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him.' Thomas, therefore, who was called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, 'Let us also go, that we may die with him.' So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary still sat in the house. Martha, therefore, said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother shall rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me shall live, even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord. I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. And when she had said this, she went away and called Mary, her sister, saying secretly, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she arose quickly and was coming to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but he was still in the place where Martha had met him. The Jews then, who were with her in the house and consoling her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled, and said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. And so the Jews were saying, behold how he loved him. But some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of him who was blind have kept this man also from dying? Jesus, therefore, again, being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. And Jesus said, remove the stone. Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. And Jesus said to her, did I not say to you, if you believe, you will see the glory of God? And so they removed the stone, and Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heardest me. And I knew that thou hearest me always, but because of the people standing around, I said it, that they may believe that thou didst send me. And when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. He who had died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around with a cloth. Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. Now that is the account of this. Let's read a few more there to see what the impact was of that. Many therefore of the Jews who had come to Mary and beheld what he had done believed in him. But some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things which Jesus had done. Therefore the chief priests and the Pharisees convened a council and were saying, what are we doing? For this man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, all men will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. But a certain one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you take into account that it is expedient for you that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation should not perish. Now this he did not say on his own initiative, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation, and not for the nations only, but that he might also gather together into one the children of God who were scattered abroad. So from that day on, they planned together to kill him. Any questions or comments on what we just read? There's a lot of detail here, isn't there? There's a lot of things that make it clear that John was right there. I mean, he heard conversations, and he even heard the conversation between Jesus and the Father, who said, I know you've heard me, Father, that you always hear me, but this time I'm doing this for those who will see this event. who will witness this, that they may know that you sent me. This was the purpose for this event. As incredible and amazing as it is, the point behind it, as John tells us, was that they would know that Jesus was sent by God. Any questions? Comments?
I heard a while back that there was some student that's the one that was teaching that Lazarus was a beggar. And then you know how it says in the book of Psalms that we never see the righteous forsaken nor begging bread. And so you're always going to have people always trying to find fault.
True. And even here, people found fault, found reasons. It said some of them were rejoicing. Some of them were saying, behold how he loved him. But some of them said, could not this man have been here to save him before? To keep him from dying? Some of the people were rejoicing and telling everybody what they saw. But others ran to the Pharisees and said, guess what we saw? And of course, at the end, John tells us again, from that moment on, they plotted to kill him. And we're even privy to the council meeting in which Caiaphas, the high priest of the Pharisees, has in his head that one man should die so that all of Jerusalem could be saved. That if they let this man go on, the Romans would come and take away their place and their religion. And so this is the thoughts that we see surrounding this. Another thing that we want to bring up. It's interesting that both Martha and Mary come running to Jesus, and what do they say? What's the first thing they say? Lord, if you had been here, my brother would still be alive. That sounds like an accusation, doesn't it? But we know that in the case of Mary, she loves Jesus. She loves him so much she washed his feet with her hair. And she fell down at his feet as soon as she saw him come. So it's not an accusation, it's a statement, isn't it? It's confidence. It says, I know that if you had been here, this wouldn't have happened. Not an accusation, although we may think that Martha said that, because Martha seems to have a little bit different attitude than Mary, doesn't she?
Even if she is kind of throwing this bit of accusation at him, you've been here, he's still alive. One thing I've learned is whenever someone's done grief, which they are, they're not coming down too hard on that person.
Correct.
Because things that might say they do may not make sense to us. So it could be the case that this was a sort of faith on her part, but even if she is actually upset that he was
Right. And one of the things that John does is he sets the stage that when Jesus does come here, there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of people consoling both Mary and Martha, and they themselves are grieving. I saw some hands over here. Her.
It's her. I just think it's interesting that the way this reads, then the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, what shall we do? For this man works many signs. We leave him alone like this, everyone will believe him. It sounds like to me they need to believe him. I mean, they're talking about him making signs. Now, I suppose they could have thought that it was some kind of magic trick. Because already just raised someone from the dead, and that freaked them out. And they're worried that everybody's going to believe in him. Sounds to me like they did, and they still wanted to kill him.
It's an interesting observation. One of the observations that we can make is that the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, if you will, and the Sadducees that make it up, had seen a lot of Jesus's come along, hadn't they? Jesus had predecessors that were fake. They were phonies. They didn't come from God, but they said they did. And they performed, according to the scriptures, signs that to others looked like miracles. You know, when you watch these magicians and illusionists do their thing, if you can't see how they do it, you might think it's a miracle. Now, we're smart enough to know that they are illusionists. And today, they don't even make any bones about it. They come out and say, we're going to do a trick, and you'll never see how I do it. But in the old days, if they made something disappear, there were gullible people out there. Oh, this man's got to be from God. He's got all these powers. And there were fake or phony prophets that came along. And so they have reason to be doubters. But I think that what we see in all the conversations with Jesus between them, remember what he called them? Whitewashed sepulchres. Sepulcher is the designation that tells you that somebody's dead. We call it a tombstone, but sometimes just seeing a headstone there, that's a sepulcher. It houses within it a dead person. And he said, you're whitewashed. And you know what that is? That's the people that go to the cemetery over there and they clean up all their relatives' tombs and stuff so they look shiny and bright. That person may have been a louse in life. That person may have been a terrible person in life, but boy, he's got a shiny sepulcher, doesn't he? That's how Jesus saw the Pharisees. Empty. Empty and dead inside. That's what he's telling them. And he looked at them with disdain because they were supposed to be the overseers of the law. And they had failed in it miserably. This meeting tells everything we need to know about how terrible they had become. They're plotting to kill somebody because he's threatening their own position. Not even a discussion here about whether he might be sent from God. And yet, their entire jobs were to serve God and to lead the people in serving God. Whitewashed sepulchres, that's what he called them. He called them vipers. Oh my goodness. Think of that. In comparison to the way that people swear and curse today, that was as bad as it got. But you see, curses in this life are meant as hurtful things. God's against these curses because who am I to say that you're a louse or you're this? But Jesus couldn't. He could look right into the heart and tell you who you were. He's not cursing you, he's labeling. And what did he call it? You brood of vipers. Because of the way they thought. This isn't the first time that we've read in the book of John that from this day on they plotted to kill him. This is more than one time. And they've been plotting it for a long time, haven't they? Not one talk about, hey, let's talk about whether this guy's for real. I mean, he's doing signs. He's teaching things. They say it. They say it. Oh, how can a man have all of this knowledge and not be from God? There is a part in here that says right before this raising took place, if you'll turn back with me to the 10th chapter. And Jesus has a conversation with them, okay? And he says, at the time of the feast of the dedication took place at Jerusalem, it was winter, and Jesus is walking in the temple in the portico of Solomon. The Jews therefore gathered around him and were saying to him, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly. And Jesus answered and said, I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, these bear witness of me. But you do not believe because you are not my sheep. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they know me. And I give eternal life to them, and they shall never perish, and no one shall snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. I and the Father are one. And they went nuts. The Jews took up stones again to stone him. And Jesus answered and said, I showed you many good works from the Father. For which of them are you stoning me? And the Jews answered him and said, for a good work we do not stone you, but for the blasphemy, and because you, being a man, make yourself out to be a God. There is the heart of it right there. There's the heart of it right there. They fell back on all their humanity, their jealousy, the contention, the disbelief, all because he made himself out to be his God. Any comments? Questions?
I think that we kind of look over here at the raising of Lazarus and that part there. When you kind of put all of it together, Jews, Pharisees, all the people really think, I'm not, it's hard for me to say that I don't believe they don't. I don't believe they don't believe. The problem is, that's not what they want. They don't want their power taken away. They don't want to change. They want to be able to keep what they are and then have Messiah that side support them.
Correct.
Who they are.
Correct. They want a king.
Right. And so when I'm doing this, I think that's why we get back over here to the place and say, he will unite the nation and even bring back the scattered. Well, we hear that so much in all sorts of places, not only in the Bible, but we don't realize what we're getting to do that. It's going to take down their religion, our religion. And it's even greater than Christian religion. And they're stronger, and here you are, yeah, you're going to go ahead and kill him, but you're going to actually create this that he wants on earth, and follow, you're going to actually fulfill God's plan.
That's a good observation. That's a good observation. Anybody else?
Even after they see the miracles, they still didn't believe.
Well, was it disbelief? Or was it not acknowledging where it came from? Because they saw it. They can't deny these things. They even use it in their comments to him. Well, how can this man here who just rubbed mud in this guy's eyes and gave him sight, how come he couldn't just come here and be here and take care of this guy? They seem to think that way. The thing that we're seeing here is a lack of understanding or comprehension about of Christ's mission, isn't it? And we even see that in the Synoptic Gospels, that people take what Jesus says wrongly. They assume that he's going to take up the mantle as king. Many times in the gospel that we've just read, Jesus knows their hearts, knows what they're intending, and he slips out the back because it's not the time for that, and that's not his mission. So there is a great misunderstanding about what Christ was, and certainly a lack of belief and faith in who he said he was, and finally his mission. Messiah. They saw the Messiah as something different.
It's kind of like
I think that they just closed their minds and their ears. They had one purpose and one purpose on was to kill him. Because they were afraid of him. They were scared to death of him. They were scared of change. And,
You see, but that sounds like bad people. Were the Jews bad people? I mean, what? Am I being honest here? Are we disgusted at these people? I am. I'm disappointed.
They were mean. I'm just saying they were afraid of him. They were afraid of change. They had gone along these things for years and years and everything. They didn't want change. They didn't understand. They wanted a king. It's like the Israelites back in the Old Testament wanted a king. And look what they got. God warned them.
Correct?
And he had warned them all along what was going to happen.
Well, Jesus was definitely destined to be king, just not the king that they wanted.
And then you have Mary and Martha who understand there's going to be a threat in, but they couldn't get to the place where, wait a minute, he can do this now. And so they're thinking, oh, he can just save illness, not that I can raise it now. Just like
Correct. Correct. And you know, let's just say and put this down here. If we went and did a study of all the people raised from the dead in the scriptures, every incident was like that. The people are like, it's not something you see every day. That person was dead, and now they're getting up, walking, and talking. Remember the guy that fell asleep when Paul was preaching forever? Remember that, Brendan? He fell out of there. He was asleep, fell out of the window, and he died. And here Paul runs down to him and says, that's okay, he's okay. Now, I'm pretty sure that the rest of his sermon didn't go quite the same, because the audience just saw a guy die and no longer dead. Your eyes are going to go over to this person. I mean, it's just human nature. Death is the end of all things, and yet the Son of God raised the dead. It's an amazing thing. I had another point, and I forgot it because somebody just made it go away. It's a senior moment. I also wanted to point out here that Jesus purposely stayed away, didn't he? This was all, if you want to call it that, a setup. Because what John teaches us in his gospel is that these are not just showing off. These are calculated times in which the glory of God is made by what is seen, and more importantly, it's a sign that Jesus is who he says he is. And that these things add up. And people see it. Wait a minute. Now, first he was teaching me in the synagogue here, saying things that no one else says. And now he's over here healing this person. And now he's over here taming the wind. Now he's raising the dead. Anybody else?
Yes. Verse 16.
Thomas.
What is he? Let us also go that we may die with him.
Any thoughts on that? Sarcasm. I don't think so.
Yeah, there's those two schools of thought. He's either being sarcastic, he's not actually doing this, so let's go back and we'll back with them. Question God. Because they say that in the tongues. He has a certain vision of that. And the other is, Jenny went, let's go, we may back with them.
It says, leading up to that, he tells them Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there so that you may believe, but let us go to him. And so there's no indication here of the reason that Thomas said that. But it is, as Brennan says, it could be either way. He could have sarcasm in here. Well, let's go die with him. Because he had, apparently, he lacked faith in what he had seen with his own eyes, time and time again.
Back in verse 8, it said that they were talking about Rabbi Short a while ago, the Jews threatened to stone him. So that was going back to this here, that they threatened
Correct.
that he was worried that he's going to die and we'll die with him.
I think that's what was on all of their minds. You see, the disciples did not want Jesus to go back into the den. He'd just come from there, and they had already said, we're going to kill you. And they probably said it in a manner that if you show your face here again, you're a dead man. So this, I think, is the motivation behind Thomas saying this. Now, whether he's being sarcastic in it, well, let's go die with him, I don't know. But I think they believe that going back to where Lazarus is means almost certain death.
And I think the context of when we all got the picture of that as a promise, and then the context of this, those are different. You gotta take the whole context of the interaction of what's going on. And I think at that moment in time, he's stating, like where I read, even in the different translations of it, I think that was a genuine statement. You're not gonna let him go on himself, we're gonna go with you.
You know, that's a good observation there too. I like that. Hey, let's all go. He doesn't need to go by. We're his disciple. We're all going. And whatever his fate is our fate. Anybody?
You know, it's just like today, you can prove to people that, you know, it's about the truth. But look what it says in John 12, verse 42. Nevertheless, among the chief rulers, also many believed on him, but because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue. For they love the praises of men more than the praises of God.
Correct. The influence of the Pharisees cannot be understated. Cannot be understated. Remember, when they were plotting to kill Jesus, they were bringing people in and grilling them. And it's arguable that they did that with Judas. We won't get into that right now, but they certainly had him there, made him an offer to give him some money, you know, all of these things. But they were plotting. That's the word. That's not a very nice word. When you're plotting something, it usually is not good. Planning seems to be a good word. Plotting, not so much. And they were plotting. That's what John tells us several times. There is one thing I wanted to point out, that there were some Pharisees who did believe, isn't there? Now, it's been brought up in discussions in the past that if we have examples of some of the Pharisees seeing this, and they were godly people, that it stands to reason that Jesus made an impact on more than we might know. That not all of them were so stubborn and everything. And I think because they had these discussions, there might have been some arguments in there. Caiaphas had to come here and say, you guys know nothing. He had to assert his power and take control and say, this is what we have to do. But I think Nicodemus, there were others, Joseph of Arimathea was reportedly a Pharisee, a good Pharisee, upstanding Pharisee, and he believed. So there is images, examples of this that we see. And we must assume that there were others that were at least conflicted. They all wanted to be wherever Jesus was, right? This is the interesting thing. They were plotting to kill him. They were going out of their way to prove that he was a liar and a deceiver, and yet everywhere he showed up, they were there. They saw it all. They watched. They observed. They heard. And that had to make an impact on a great many. How many? Don't know. But after Jesus died, was resurrected, and the apostles come into their power, we see the interaction between those and the Pharisees, don't we? And it's a lot more of a commitment. It's a lot more of a commitment at that point. Any other questions, comments, examples? What do you think of this? What do you think of this account? We're told in this account about people saying things. About people, in the case of Jesus, talking and praying to God. He wasn't speaking to the people, but his words are recorded in John. Mary and Martha having private conversations with them, and yet it's recorded. The words they said. The emotions are brought out in it. John's giving us a detailed account here, isn't he? There's no question at all that he was there, that he was an eyewitness to this. And again, he spends an entire chapter and the one after describing not only this deed, but the impact on it.
I think it's describing that, showing that it has a lot of where you actually see that there is a God side, human side, and that's what Jesus.
You know, that's a very good observation.
If you look at it, he's letting you see the attachment to people here on earth, that bond, and then he's also showing the conniving power of how humans are to, I gotta be able to deny what I'm seeing so I can maintain my power over here, the Pharisees, and other leaders, and he's showing all that struggle of God and showing how God is also human here on earth and really attached to people and cares about them and their interactions with the Father.
Details. Details.
And you're getting to see the whole picture. So if I'm gonna be a part of this church, part of this family, I have to understand the family, all of them.
Good observation. We are seeing the human interaction here about Jesus dealing with the Messiahship and how he has to deal with that and the people. And then we have another aspect of God dealing with Jesus. And then we have now the human interaction with the various factions, powerhouses, and these different groups and people who see it. Remember, there's some people who were witnessing this. They weren't in Jerusalem. They were out and about. In fact, if you listen and read here, it seems that in Galilee there were more people that wanted to flock to him than when he went into the other cities. They saw and they believed and they followed him. That's what we've done. That's what we've done. We saw, we beheld, we believed, and our faith is strengthened in being a citizen in Christ. We're following that same pattern. As we wrap this up for today, I have a question. In this book, we just read about a man being raised from the dead. A major, major thing by any account. And we saw it and read it in detail. It's not just, well, he went there, he did this, he raised the guy, and that's it. Few scriptures, moving on. No, we got detailed accounts. We're talking with the people, the family, the grievers, even Jesus speaking to the Father before he does it. Again, I ask, this is a major event, and yet not mentioned in any of the other Gospels. Any thoughts on that?
Remember Mary and Martha, when they were together, Jesus told Martha, you're too wrapped in Titus, trying to serve, feed others, when Mary's putting her eyes on the Bible. And Jesus was trying to get people to believe, despite the death of Lazarus, look to the Bible instead of worldly things.
Any thoughts, comments?
Well, like I said that earlier, are more about chosen. Here, spoke. Now, I want to show you the whole picture, human, spiritual, everything like that. I think that's one reason why he did that impression. All those details, human, godly, and how the power of evil and earth, wanting to create the powerful people, all that interacts. This is what Jesus power is the story of earth. That's just my
It is. It is a lot deeper, covers a lot different things. It covers, and as the commentaries always tell us, it covers the humanity and the deity of Jesus and that dichotomy. Anybody else? I wanted, and I would be amiss if I did not point out, that John does one of those things of absolutes again. Jesus wept, and it says volumes. I can't read that without it tugging at my own heart, because I can only imagine the grief and the pain that the Son of the living God sensed there amongst somebody he loved. He was personally knowledgeable of Lazarus. He was his friend, it says. Intimate with him. And the humanity part of it. Jesus wept. All right, that's all I have for today, and it's time for us to break this. I thank you very much for your attention. The plans that we have is for us next week to summarize everything that we did, to kind of go through it and review just a little bit about what we covered, why we covered it, give you guys a chance to say anything that you might want to put into here, what you got out of this, if you will. And we will cover that last little miracle that happens as they go off to see him ascend into heaven. And we will finish all that up and summarize everything next week. Anything else? Thank you for your kind attention and your patience.